Hi, it's Jeff from Three Old Guys Hobbies and Games, and we're going to continue our trek through World War I strategic games today with a look at empires and alliances. We are, in fact, narrowing our scope a little bit because previous games that we've looked at have either been extremely strategic or they've covered the entire world in one way or another. And this one does not. This one focuses on Europe. We do have one more big game to go through, but we'll see that one pretty soon. Empires and Alliances was released by Compass Games a year or so ago, I believe, and fundamentally, and don't take this wrong, but fundamentally it's kind of a reworking of the old Avalon Hill game, Guns of August. They've added some extra chrome, they've made the rules easier to work with, and they've changed the combat results table, but overall it's very similar to the old Avalon Hill game. Let's take a look at the back of the box. You can kind of see some of the information there. Graphics quality on this is much better than the original Avalon Hill game was, and that's perfectly normal considering it's been 35, 40 years since Guns of August was published. So yeah, the graphic quality is going to be quite a bit higher. So let's go ahead and open the box and take a look at the components, and we'll talk about how the game flows a little bit as we do this. Kind of a combination box opening and review all in one. As usual, it's a Compass Games box, so tight-fitting, well-made box that's going to last you a while. We have two 10-sided dice that come with the game. We have a rule book. Excuse me, I'll put these on. We have a number of charts and tables. We have everything from initial deployment type tables and information about the capital, for example, and how you produce units for the game. We also have combat results table. We have a weather table on the back of this one, by the way, and also rail capacity and sea capacity tables for the different countries. We have the combat results table. As you can see, it's expanded quite a bit from the old Avalon Hill standard of 1d6 with perhaps a couple of die roll modifications. This game uses pretty similar information to the original game, but the number of results are expanded quite a bit. The die roll modifiers are changed, and there's a lot more changes to combat power based on what's going on terrain-wise in the hex that you're fighting over. Speaking of terrain, we have the terrain effects chart. You'll note one of the things that doesn't appear on this terrain effects chart is a fortification. In other games, they're often printed on the map board, but in this particular case, they're going to be provided by counters that can be removed because, after all, they can be destroyed by siege. And again, a repeat of the tables there. Now we come to the heart of a lot of this, which is the mobilization charts. At the very top here, this is Britain. At the very top here, you can see that the initial forces are listed. They have 2 infantry corps and a cavalry corps. And then we have a reinforcement listing that runs the length of the chart. You'll notice also these central boxes here are in fact replacement tracks that provide you information on how many replacements come in and where they arrive. There's also limitations on how many replacements you can have available in any box. So, for example, October of 1914, British replacements began arriving in London, and then in January of 1915, an extra infantry replacement begins arriving in either London or the Middle East box. So you can work with your Middle Eastern troops to keep them up to strength as well. Back of this is France. You know, we have Serbia, Greece, Netherlands, Montenegro. You know, shows their starting forces and so on and so forth. That's one change from Guns of August, is that we do have smaller units. Guns of August was strictly a core game, core-sized operational units, with barring some special units like artillery and tanks and aircraft. This game actually has divisional breakdowns available. Not very many of them, but you can, in fact, engage with just divisions as well. And again, another mobilization chart. This time we have the United States over here. We have Italy, Romania, and I don't know who that is. Oh, that's American. That's the American replacements, okay? And on the back here, we got Russia, basically. Gives you their reinforcement schedule. And you'll note that sometimes it says add 1, 2, 2, 3 field artillery, and then it'll give you like 7th field artillery. But the historical designations aren't terribly important. I mean, it's the strength that matters. So And here's the starting formations for the Russians. Next we have Germany. Central powers, basically Germany, Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary's replacements are listed down here. And again, you'll note that some of these replacement things arrive in pretty widely distributed places, which means that if you lose a city, you don't lose all of your replacements like you would if you lost London. And on this side, we have the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria, the other two members of the Central Powers. So pretty straightforward there as well. Okay. We have repeats of the terrain and combat effects charts, so we'll skip past that. Let's talk about the units here for a little bit. This particular one shows Austria-Hungary here, Britain here, and then several minor powers like Serbia and so on. As you can see, the units are primarily core-sized, and the numbers, by the way, are pretty much identical with the original Avalon Hill game, which, makes it fairly easy if you played that old game, but, it's kind of just realize that it's a remake of the game with some extra chrome added. We have a bunch of markers here, and some of these are trench levels, some of them are fortifications, some of them are railheads, and also indicates whether or not the rail system was used, and so on. There are no breakdowns on the back here, but we'll see how this shapes up. Next we have the Germans, the gray, the Americans in olive drab, Italians in green. Romania is a different shade of green. Fortunately, it's highly unlikely these two countries will face each other in combat, so you won't be confused by it. But in the unlikely event that does happen, pay attention to your unit colors. Some extra French and Serbian units are also on this board. So we have replacement point markers here that you can use to track your replacement points as they come in, and also supply markers. So one of the nice things about this game is because, let's take a look at the back of this one. One of the nice things about this game is that the backs have the flag. This allows you, if you want to use Fog of War if you're playing against an opponent. Obviously, in a solitaire game, that might be a little difficult, though the solitaire rateability of this one is listed as a 9, so it's highly suitable for solitaire play if you want. So this would enable you to have Fog of War if you were confronting another player in the game. And that's a nice touch, I got to admit. Here we have Russian forces in the I guess, Russian brown color of uniform. French units and some more Romanians, Italians, and Serbians here. So, quickly there. And again, the numbers are pretty much identical with the original numbers in the game. You'll see Greece down here. Okay, we have more Romanian forces, some extra Americans. We have the Ottoman Empire is the yellow here. We have Montenegro along the bottom row there, and the Netherlands here. Then we have Bulgaria, Italy, some extra forces for Italy, some extra forces for Austria-Hungary, extra units for Russia, Britain, Germany. So again, a pretty good collection of units there. And you'll note, like I said, there are some breakdowns in the terms of divisions that can be brought in. For example, the Montenegrins are all divisional, and the Netherlands are as well, which again is kind of a nice touch, almost a bit of flavor from the old Avalon Hill game 1914, which we will be talking about in the future. I did want to point out the fort markers here, and you'll see the name of the place where the fort exists and the level of the fort, 2 or 1. And that'll have effects on your die roll modifiers, and your strength and artillery operates against it, and so on and so forth. So it can be pretty interesting. Also note the German units here. They're your standard core strength, but it's got an S in the middle, meaning Stoßtruppen. So these are the infiltration troops that come in 1917. All right. So we'll move past that now and take a look at the maps. And as I said, the graphics are a little better than the old one. This one is, by the way, a fairly large game, so you're going to need some floor space or table space or whatever to play it very effectively. Let me clean up my desk here a little bit. We'll go back to the rule book in a little while. Alrighty. All right, first of all, we have basically the Ottoman Empire map, which takes southern Balkans and Eastern Front and extends it a little bit down. But it also note that it has the the Caucasus box and the Middle East box, which you will be basically fighting those campaigns in different, as opposed to maps. You'll be doing it in a different way. But it'll work. It still works. By the way, this is Damascus, which is a major city, and that's how the major cities actually look on the map. If you take a look here at Constantinople, you'll see that it's got the same sort of painting as the major city there. This one also happens to be a capital and a port. This over here is a historical area. So they've got these scattered across the map. So the Gallipoli Peninsula right there, it's got a little historical marker. It's totally irrelevant to the game. It's merely there for your historical enjoyment. And these yellow dots are minor cities, which have very little effect on anything, again, combat-wise. So, and you can see the rail lines connecting the rivers, mountains, forest, and so on. All in all, it's a very pretty map. I kind of like this one. I think it's going to be good. Unfortunately, unlike Avalon Hill's version, it's not mounted, so you've got some issues there. But it will, in fact, do the job. This, I would say, is the heart of the map set, in a way, because basically it's the Western Front, which is where most of the Allied players' effort is going to be. These little square boxes are mobilization hexes, and they're labeled just with the Army designation, so 5th Army, you know. And basically that's where you'll set up your starting forces on the map in order to engage in the game. And we have up here a game turn track, and we also have some weather boxes in areas that are not going to be used in the game. So the Eastern Front's in Sweden and the Western Front's in Britain. You won't be campaigning in either of those areas, so that shouldn't be a problem for anybody. Denmark doesn't have a lot of terrain as well, because obviously it's not going to be engaged in the fight. The borders are in black, and they appear to be pretty accurate as far as they go. You know, the Austrians' border is pretty solid. The German border is just exactly right. Switzerland is a neutral area, so they don't have a lot of detail in there. You won't be invading it. And it basically gives you some idea what the maps look like. One thing that I will point out is these yellow lines across the certain hexes. Basically, those are beaches. They're suitable for invasion if you conduct an amphibious invasion. So you'll see some in France and a couple in Germany, so that you can engage in a naval invasion as the Western Allied player, assuming the German player makes the kind of mistake necessary for that to happen. And again, I'll point out some of the historical things over here. We have Cambrai, St. Quentin, and these were areas where major combat occurred during the war. Ypres up here. By the way, my grandfather fought in that area. He was an American. He went over there in 1917, and the British asked for some stiffening, and he sent his division to stiffen them. By the end of the war, they were advancing across Belgium. Let's take a look at the Eastern Front map now. And again, there's going to be some overlap in these maps. But you can see basically the same kind of structure here. We've got minor cities, we've got major cities, and terrain, the Pripyat Marshes, of course, everybody knows about that. St. Petersburg in the north, which is the capital. Moscow, which is a central rail hub, but not the capital. And basically, it's a pretty straightforward map. Terrain looks just about right, and the borders are highly accurate as far as they can be. Scale on the map, by the way, is about 30 miles to the hex, and the game turns are a month long. And of course, the units are primarily corps-sized combat units. So we'll take a look at that for a little while. All right. Last map we're going to look at is the Balkan Front. And let me get this unfolded here without causing major disaster. So basically the Balkans and Italy. And most of the Italian front, by the way, is actually on the Western Front map. But there's a little bit in the north here. You'll see Montenegro and Serbia, Albania, which is basically neutral country but was fought over. The Italians basically made it a protectorate at this time during the war. And, again, we've got some terrain in Italy because you can fight there, but they're not worried too much about the islands or North Africa or anything. We have Central Powers replacement pool, Allied replacement pool, and so on. different reinforcement boxes and eliminated units boxes, because you do get replacements, which means you can reform eliminated units. Note, by the way, we have some mobilization hexes down here for the Serbian army and for the Austrians down here as well. And that's pretty much the end of the maps. In some ways, I guess they're a little blander than other games that we've looked at, but at the same time, they're very utilitarian and easy to navigate. And the hexes are large enough to make it easy to operate. Let's take a look at the rules. Table of contents here, basically very similar to Guns of August. I've taken a look at this. There are some changes a little bit to the artillery to make it a little simpler to operate. They've made some changes to certain things in terms of logistics. The way the trenches are handled is a little different. The way the forts are handled is a little different. And generally speaking, it's pretty close, though. And it gives you some idea of what you're dealing with here. They've got quite a bit of chrome in this game, so there's a lot of special rules that are worth paying attention to. So we're going to go ahead and flip through here a little bit. So advancing railheads, something that wasn't really paid that much attention to in Guns of August. And one of the things that you have to do is repair the railheads and take control of the rails in order to provide logistics to support your units. Pretty straightforward, very similar to other games in the system, and fairly easily handled. Meaning that it's not a complex process to deal with it, but it is something you have to pay attention to. And again, throughout this rule book, we're talking, they've got the automatic victory rules. Basically, the way the game's set up is both sides could theoretically win an immediate victory in 1914. The odds are highly against it, though. It'll be highly unusual for that to actually happen, assuming any competence at all on the level of your opposing player. So, combat resolution procedure is a little more complex than before, but they've structured the rules better. I found these rules easier to read in some ways than the old Avalon Hill ones. I'm not sure if that's because everybody's so much better a writer nowadays, or because the rule writers feel it necessary to compensate for the complexity of the systems, because most games obviously don't have 30 pages of rules. All right, supply is a little more expanded than it was before. And they talk about the different kinds of supply, the supply sources, the supply paths. I actually think that these rules are much more accurate in terms of what was really going on in World War I. The original game's supply rules were fairly straightforward, a fairly simple thing, and didn't really get into so much detail. But these guys spent some time on fixing some of the issues that cropped up with Guns of August, which I appreciate. And all in all, I think they've done a pretty good job of adjusting this to a more modern take on the original game. I'm not knocking the original game. That's pretty awesome, too, and we will be taking a look at it later on in this series. But basically, this, I think, is a worthy successor to Guns of August. Again, I'm just going to flip some pages fairly quickly here. Reinforcements and replacements. We talk about trenches and fortifications and special units. There are 4 types of special units in this game. One is Stoßtruppen, the German infiltration troops, siege artillery, tanks, which is the Allied equivalent of Stoßtruppen, and air units. Air units don't have a tremendous effect, but they do, especially late in the game, provide some help to you as an attacking force. And I don't know if you noticed on the counter sheets, we can take another look at those before we wrap this up, but there are in fact separate air units with, I think, better graphic symbology than the ones that were included with Guns of August. In fact, overall, I'd say the graphics in this are an enormous improvement. But again, it's been, 35, 40 years since Guns of August was produced. They talk about political matters here, and they've expanded that a little bit over the original rules. And that's not a bad thing, because a lot of times there were questions in Guns of August that were difficult to resolve, involved players arguing and rolling dice and things like that. And this time, they've laid out a better structure, I feel, for the political matters than were in the original rules. They've also talked about economic warfare in some more detail here. That starts in section 19 down here at the bottom right of the second page, page 15. And that is going to be important in terms of victory conditions. They have weather. There were weather rules, if I remember correctly, in Guns of August, but these, again, are presented more clearly than the original rules were, in my opinion. National morale is, of course, a player in this. Fundamentally, you're dealing with two alliances engaged in massive industrial warfare, and really the only way to measure victory is whose morale collapses first. And that's a pretty fundamental function of the game, is what it turns out to be. Then we go into optional rules. One of the things you can do is, instead of following the standard mobilization, which is printed on the map as we showed you, you can see that you can do flexible mobilization. That is, you can decide to deploy your army in another direction. So the Germans could put more forces in the Eastern Front and not worry so much about conquering France. Again, it's choices. You have trade-offs in each decision that you make, so it's worth thinking about. Then we have some details on how the different countries would deploy optionally. We also have a variable entry thing. Historically in the game, basically Italy, Romania, the Ottomans, the United States, they come in when they come in. But what they've done is provided you some rules to control when, in fact, they might come in. It adds a little bit of mystery and excitement to the whole process, so that's a good thing in terms of replayability of the game, in my opinion. And then we talk about different things like the Schlieffen plan and so on and so forth, so that they can figure out whether or not you want to execute that, and if so, these are the requirements that you're required to meet to do so. Plan 17 for the French, that was their starting plan. We have breakdown counters. Again, that's a huge difference from for Guns of August. And it adds flexibility to your game, especially on the Eastern Front, where you sometimes have to cover quite a bit of front with not very many corps, but these divisional breakdowns will allow you to do that. And there are some special rules for things like the Argonne Forest, and you can extend the campaign game. So, pretty straightforward. Credits are given at the bottom there. We won't worry about that too much. And then over here, we start the scenarios. And basically, a lot of this information is on the scenario cards that we gave you, or that they give you in the box, but it also lays things out so that you can see how the forces were deployed historically. So this 1914 setup is also used, of course, for the campaign game with a couple of extra additional things. So, to additional units and so on. Scenario 2 is 1914 to 1918, the campaign game. And let's see what we got here. Yeah, pretty straightforward. That's it, basically 2 scenarios, it looks like. Victory conditions, I think, are very similar to the original victory conditions in Guns of August, but again, there are some changes and some things that make it more flexible and make it more of a guessing game sometimes, which is, again, I think a good thing because it definitely increases replayability of the game. Yeah, that's a good thing. Excuse me. Oh, there is a third scenario. Excuse me, which is just the 1918 scenario. Basically, the Americans show up, and now you're in a situation where the Germans attack with the Stoßtruppen, and the Americans show up to stiffen the line, and then the Allies counterattack. And it fundamentally is going to work like that. But if you're highly successful as a German, the Allies may not get that counterattack. So, again, it depends on how well you position your forces in play. So, and then over here we've got lists of units, and where they are front-wise and so on and so forth. So, and that's for the initial deployment. And that's pretty much it. We've got some few special rules, but those are specific to the scenario. And last but not least, we have a layout of the victory levels. So get some idea of how different victory point things that you can be awarded, and then how they stack up as to who wins. And that's pretty much it for the rules. Like I said, I think it's a pretty worthy remake of Guns of August. I think this is something that, if you're interested at all in World War I, especially in European theater at a strategic level, then I think this is definitely a game you want to seriously consider adding to your collection. And it's available So if you want to order it from us, we'd be happy to help provide that to you. I'm pulling out a unit counter set here so we can take a look at things like aircraft. If I can find, there we go. So again, the original game had some pretty kind of cheesy counters for the air units. The numbers haven't changed, but they put a nice little airplane silhouette on there for the Germans and the French and the British, Americans, and so on. And that's a nice touch. Generally, that's a nice touch. So that's pretty much it for the game. I haven't gotten this one on the table yet because I don't have a table big enough for this one at this time. I hope to in the not too distant future, and maybe at that time we'll do a more in-depth review. But basically, this is the game, and I'm got to tell you, I'm pretty happy I added it to my collection. I do have a copy of Guns of August, and like I said, we will be reviewing that as well. And we'll talk about the differences when that comes in, but when we get to that that review. But basically, all in all, I really appreciate the way they did this. I think it's going to be an excellent game. If it plays anything at all like Guns of August did, then it's going to be a pretty straightforward slugfest between the two players. But the nice thing about it is the way Guns of August was set up, and presumably the way this is set up too, both sides get a chance to attack and defend at different intervals during the game. And that is, after all, what makes it interesting. You don't want to be the poor guy that's stuck all the time just defending or just attacking. So this game will provide you with opportunities to do both. And that pretty much concludes this review. If you like this, please click on the like, and if you subscribe, we'd appreciate that as well. And if you have any questions, don't be hesitating to ask them in the bottom below the video. We appreciate your time, and thank you very much for your attention.